My family bullied me my whole life, so I cut them off and moved in with my grandparents. Now, right before my wedding, they're begging for forgiveness after learning the inheritance was left to me. Can you believe some people? Just when you think you've finally escaped the shadow of a truly toxic family, they crawl right back out of the woodwork, begging for a fresh start, but only when it suits them. My wedding is next week, and my biological family, who haven't spoken to me in a decade, are suddenly desperate to reconnect. And trust me, you won't believe why. Let me take you back 10 years. The day I turned 18, I packed a bag and walked straight out of that house. Literally the day I became an adult, I bolted. And I have my older brother and my parents to thank for that. My brother bullied me relentlessly my entire life, and my parents? They just watched. He was 5 years older, much bigger, and constantly pushed me around. I'd complain, I'd beg them for help, but their response was always the same. That's just how brothers play. It's rough and tumble. You need to get used to it. They expected me to just be fine with it. But it wasn't just physical. As we got older, the emotional hit started. He'd make me the butt of every joke, humiliate me in front of my friends at school, mock my grades, my appearance during puberty, everything. It wasn't friendly teasing, it was downright cruel. He'd pull the most awful pranks with his friends, always making me feel small, worthless. And I learned early on that my parents weren't going to step in. They'd just sit back, silently condoning it all. I wasn't even allowed to talk about it to other family members. My parents made it crystal clear, if I humiliated them, I'd be very sorry. And honestly, I didn't want to find out what that meant. So, I kept my mouth shut. Then, just a couple of days before my 18th birthday, my brother and I had a massive fight. It turned into a brawl, and I ended up pretty hurt. Even then, my parents didn't care who started it. It was obviously him. They just screamed at me for picking a fight I knew I'd lose, for being so much smaller. That was it. That was the last straw. I stormed out and went straight to my grandparents' house, just a few blocks away. I showed up on their doorstep and just unleashed everything. Not just about that last fight, but about years of abuse, the silence, the fear. My grandparents were absolutely scandalized. See, my family always put on this perfect facade for everyone else, so no one would ever guess what went on behind closed doors. Without a second thought, they told me I was welcome to stay. That was my ticket out. A few days later, on my 18th birthday, I walked out of my parents' house, bags packed, and I didn't even say goodbye. I just left, and we haven't spoken since. My grandparents became my family. They paid for my college, let me live with them while I found a job. They were just there. Always. My parents and brother would occasionally talk to my grandparents, and my grandparents, bless their hearts, would try to mediate, to get them to apologize. But my family was rigid. I was the one who ran away for no reason, so I had to be the one to reach out. I wasn't interested. Until they could acknowledge their own fault, we had nothing to discuss. So, 10 years of absolute silence. And now, suddenly, they're emailing me, asking for a fresh start. Did they reach out when I got engaged? Or when my wedding invitations went out? Nope. Radio silence. So, when that email landed, I just ignored it. But I did tell my grandparents. And that's when they dropped a bombshell. Apparently, a couple of weeks before this, my grandparents had seen their lawyer. They changed their will. Instead of splitting everything equally between my dad, my brother, and me, they decided to leave the vast majority to me. My dad and brother would get a few thousand, that's it. And they told my family. They wanted them to know this was my wedding gift, and that they weren't getting much because of how they'd treated me. My grandparents had tried for years to get my family to talk to me, to mend things. But they finally realized their son, my father, my mother, and my brother, they were just horrible people. They'd had enough. Not only were they cutting them off, but they decided to rub it in their faces. And that, my friends, is why my parents suddenly wanted a fresh start. They wanted forgiveness from my grandparents, not me. When I found out, I just had to respond. I emailed them back and told them I knew exactly why they were suddenly so interested in a fresh start. I told them they were pathetic, and that they were getting exactly what they deserved, absolutely nothing. I told my fiancée about it. She knows my whole story. She thought it was unnecessary for me to reply. A little petty, she said, and I probably should have just ignored them. We didn't fight, and she wasn't mad, but her comment got me thinking. Was I being petty? Maybe. But honestly, they deserved every word. I'm not apologizing to them, ever. But I wondered, Was I wrong to throw it back in their faces? A few days later, they replied, "Oh, the transparency." They said they realized recently how wrong they'd been and it had nothing to do with the inheritance. I almost choked. It was so obviously a lie. I felt a pang of something. Pity, maybe? Because it was so damn clear this was all about the money. If they were truly sorry, they wouldn't have waited 10 years. My grandparents had been telling them for ages to apologize. Even just a few months ago, they were still dead set against it. But now, with the inheritance gone, suddenly, they've realized their mistake. Right. I didn't reply. I just blocked them. As for my fiancée, we talked about it. She just speaks her mind, and I appreciate that. I admitted that. Yeah, maybe it was a bit petty. But then I said, honestly, they deserve this. She just shrugged. She said I was the one who went through it all, and I knew how to deal with the situation. She wasn't going to judge me. Her only real concern was that this was happening so close to the wedding. She didn't want them showing up. And when she said that, a cold dread hit me. I wouldn't put it past them. They love creating trouble for me. So, I tightened security at the venue. Better safe than sorry. My grandparents told me that my parents had even tried to contact them again, right before their desperate email to me. But my grandparents had blocked them everywhere. My parents ended up using a burner phone, and my grandpa told them they were done. They'd given them 10 years to change, and they hadn't. And then my grandparents told me the whole story of what had actually prompted them to change the will. A few weeks prior, they'd had a massive fight with my parents, all about my brother. For years, my grandparents had been funding his business, just because my dad asked them to. But my brother, bless his heart, just doesn't have what it takes. The business was failing, but my parents kept insisting my grandparents pour more money into it. Eventually, my grandparents stopped. That's when my parents threw a fit. It showed how incredibly ungrateful they were. They completely ignored all the money poured into that failing venture, all the chances my brother got, and only focused on my grandparents stopping the gravy train. It was a nasty fight, and that was the turning point for my grandparents. They realized they didn't want anything to do with these people anymore. For 10 years, they'd hoped my father would change, but he'd only gotten worse. All of them had terrible attitudes. So, they cut them off and left most of their inheritance to me. They hadn't told me earlier because they didn't want to stress me out before the wedding. But honestly, knowing all this, it just makes me feel even better about my response. My family really is the worst. I'm so glad they're not in my life anymore. And I'm even happier that they're completely out of my grandparents' lives too. I never had a problem with my grandparents staying in touch with them, but now, knowing everything, I'm just so relieved it's finally over. Alright, so my wedding is tomorrow. Just a couple of days ago, my grandparents called. My parents and brother? They are not letting this go. They actually showed up at my grandparents' house, demanding my address. They wanted to apologize to me in person because, apparently, it was very important and had to be done. The nasty attitudes? Gone. They were trying their absolute hardest to be apologetic. But my grandparents were firm. They pointed out that they'd already tried apologizing via email, and since I hadn't accepted that, they weren't comfortable giving out my address. Especially with my wedding so close. They didn't want to stress me out. Whatever this was, it would have to wait until after the wedding. But my family wouldn't back down. They swore they wouldn't leave until they had my address or some way to contact me. They were blocked everywhere, they said, and they really needed to talk. They'd realized their mistake and didn't want to waste any more time. They even said they knew I was getting married and wanted to apologize before the wedding, so it could be a symbolic fresh start for everyone. I mean, seriously? A fresh start by being considerate for once. Not thinking about themselves? Guess that's too much to ask. They kept insisting, refused to leave, until my grandparents finally threatened to call the cops. It was getting weird. That's when my dad started trying to emotionally manipulate my grandparents. He said he knew he'd messed up, but as his parents, the least they could do was give him a second chance. Here's the thing, though. It wasn't my grandparents' place to give him a second chance. If they were truly sorry, they knew I was the one to apologize to, not my grandparents. And that's exactly what my grandparents told them. They had no control over the situation. If I wanted to talk to them, if I wanted to forgive them, only then could they help. But since I'd made it very clear I wanted nothing to do with my parents, it couldn't be helped. When my grandparents told me this, I could just feel their frustration. They'd spent their entire morning trying to reason with my parents and my brother. Yes, my brother was there too. He didn't say anything, But from his face, it was clear he did not want to be there, especially if it involved asking me for forgiveness. He just stood there, trying to look apologetic, while my parents did all the talking. It's genuinely concerning how far they're willing to go for money. They don't care about anyone but themselves. What's even weirder is that my parents have always done pretty well for themselves. They're not billionaires, but neither are my grandparents. They're all on pretty much the same financial level. Everyone, except my brother, has done well in their lives. And even my brother could get back on track if he stopped trying to be an entrepreneur and went back to a corporate job. So why this desperate obsession with the inheritance? I just don't get it. After that call, I told my grandparents that next time they show up, just don't let them in. My grandparents agreed. It's gotten completely out of hand. They wasted 2 hours of their time today, and my grandparents were agitated. Nothing good can come from talking to them. We all realize that now. So, we're avoiding them. And for the next few days, we'll be away for the wedding anyway. They can keep showing up at my grandparents' place, but it'll be pointless. I just hope they don't somehow find the wedding venue. Most of my invited family know about my relationship with my side of the family, so I'm hoping they don't spill any details. But even if they do, we have security, so I'm not overly worried. Okay, everyone, it's been a few days since my last update, and I'm getting married tomorrow. I actually asked every single guest if they'd shared any wedding details with my parents or brother, and everyone said no. I was so relieved. But even then, I'm posting now because a couple of hours ago, I got another email from my parents. This time, they were even more desperate. All they knew was that I was getting married tomorrow. That was their only piece of information. They started by congratulating me, but then it all came back to the same thing. I swear to God, if I have to read the words "fresh start" one more time, I will literally barf. Even after the congratulations and wishing me a beautiful wedding, they went right back to hoping for a favorable reply, hoping I'd forgive them and at least try to talk. They admitted they tried talking to everyone in the family to find out where I was getting married, but no one gave them any information. So, they were counting on me to tell them the venue, so they could show up and bless me because they were truly sorry and wanted to be there on my special day. They wanted to show me they'd changed and were supportive now. You know what would be truly supportive? Choosing to stay away and not stress me out before my special day. But, of course, that's a reasonable expectation, so naturally, they wouldn't do that. They ended the email by, you guessed it, hoping I'd forgive them and let them know the venue so they could show up for the wedding, even if it's last minute. I just rolled my eyes and deleted it. I didn't even talk about it to anyone else. I didn't want to bring that negativity into my wedding day. I'm getting married tomorrow, and I want to be happy. All this nonsense can wait until after I say I do. Then, I'll discuss it with my wife and grandparents. But for now, I just needed to get it out of my system. Hey everyone. It's been a week since I got married, and honestly, things have been absolutely perfect. We had the most incredible time. Everything went smoothly, and my parents? They didn't show up. Because, well, they had no idea where to go. For the past few days, I didn't even bother checking my inbox. I just knew they'd be trying again, and I didn't want any of that negativity. I didn't want to think about them. But today, back home, I finally decided to look. And just as I expected, 10 new emails. All the same, we're sorry. We really want to be there for you. We understand why you're acting like this. We really want to talk. Blah, blah, blah. I deleted every single one, blocked their new email address, and tried to move on. But right after that, my grandparents called. My father was at their place. He wanted to talk to me. I could tell how distressed my grandparents were. So, I decided, okay, fine. Let's deal with this, once and for all. Otherwise, they'd just keep finding new ways to bother me and my grandparents. And I wasn't going to let that happen. Besides, 10 years had passed. I wasn't scared of them anymore. I just wanted it over. After filling my wife in, I headed to my grandparents' house. My dad actually opened the door. He hugged me, started telling me how sorry he was, how he'd misunderstood me my entire life. But in reality, I was the son he'd always wanted. And my brother? A total loser. I think he probably thought that was what I wanted to hear. But it just made me sick. It was the same old game, pitting us against each other, playing favorites based on what they thought we were worth, when all they should have done was love us both equally. I pushed him away. I told him I knew exactly what this was about, and they needed to stop bothering all of us. My mind was made up. I wanted nothing to do with them. If they thought they could constantly disrupt our lives and force us back into contact, they were delusional. The only reason my grandparents even called me was to put an end to this, to give my father a chance to hear it directly from me, so he would know, without a doubt, that I was done. I didn't know them even that much, but I was doing it for my grandparents. I didn't want them to suffer anymore. I know it's hard for them to turn away their own son, their only child. But my parents were so inconsiderate, only interested in what was good for them. They didn't care about the pain they caused. They treated me badly. Now they faced the consequences. They disrespected my grandparents. Now they faced the consequences. What goes around comes around. It was time they learned they weren't an exception. They needed to stop begging. It was pathetic, and their act couldn't be more transparent. We all knew they only cared about the inheritance, nothing else. I told them it was sad, really, that they were so obsessed with money they couldn't even bother with their own dignity. They weren't poor. They were just as well off as my grandparents. They didn't desperately need this money. That's when my father snapped. He started screaming at me. He accused me of manipulating my grandparents, of being behind all of this, saying I'd just exposed myself. I had no idea what he was talking about, but it was clear he just wanted a scapegoat. As usual, he yelled that his money was none of my business, but my grandparents' inheritance was rightfully his, and he wasn't going to let me have it. He threatened to go to every court to make sure I couldn't take it away from him. My grandparents were clearly very disturbed. They got involved, there was a lot of yelling, and eventually, my dad stormed out. He promised me I wouldn't have this attitude and this inheritance for much longer. He was going to come after all of us with lawyers. And then he was gone. I guess he just couldn't stand the fact that I was finally standing up to him, calling out his BS. His ego got the better of him, and he finally dropped the apologetic act. And you know what? I'm glad I gave him that chance. Now he can't pretend anymore. None of them can act like they're saints, sorry for what they've done. His threats? They didn't scare any of us. It's up to my grandparents who they leave their inheritance to. And since they're still alive and well, no sane lawyer is going to touch this ridiculous case. Plus, my grandparents were smart. They left a little something to my dad and brother, so they can't claim they were intentionally excluded. It's an airtight will. They can't do anything. After my dad stormed out, I sat with my grandparents. I even called my wife over, and we all had dinner together. My grandparents were so happy that I had dealt with this once and for all. They were sure my dad wouldn't cause them any more trouble anytime soon. And I feel the same way. When my wife arrived, we actually had a good laugh about his meltdown. It was a fun evening. And you know, I think this is the way to deal with my family. Just laugh about them. Let it go. Because they're really not worth taking seriously. I'm so incredibly happy to have such supportive grandparents and my wonderful wife. Honestly, they're the only family I'll ever need.